Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Member Birkbeck Garcia. Can we do a mic check just to make sure we can hear you?
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
We'll be starting in 2 minutes, correct?
Yes, as soon as we have a quorum. Good afternoon, Vice Chair Sanchez. We just want to make sure we can hear you.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Thank you. Paula, we need 6, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thanks. We have a quorum, Chair Vargas.
Fantastic, right on time. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the April 16, 2020 meeting of the San Diego County Air Pollution Control District Governing Board. I will now call the meeting to order officially at 1:30 p.m. I'm going to ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Thank you, Chair Vargas. Before I call the roll, I would like to note for the record that all members are participating via teleconference. As such, all votes will be taken by roll call vote. With that, Member Birkbeck Garcia.
Here.
Member Bush. Member Elo Rivera.
Present.
Member Fletcher. Member Gomez.
Here.
Member Martinez.
Present.
Member Medina.
Present.
Member Shu.
Here.
Member Whitburn.
Present.
Vice Chair Sanchez.
Here.
Chair Vargas.
Vargas here.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to remind board members to please turn your cameras on and everyone to mute your microphone. If you're not speaking, remember to raise your hand or use the raise hand feature on the Zoom if you have a comment or question, and I will make sure I recognize you. Let me make sure I have that feature on so that in case anybody's asking me questions, I can see you. There you go. So we're going to move on to public communication. This is an opportunity for members of the public to speak to the board on any subject matter within the board's jurisdiction, but not on items that are on today's agenda. So Madam Clerk, are there any members of the public that wish to address the board?
Thank you, Chair Vargas. We have one member of the public that wishes to address the board under non-agenda public comment. I will be calling the speaker by the last 4 digits of their phone number. You will hear a notification that your call has been unmuted. At that time, you will need to press *6 to unmute your phone. You will be asked to state your name for the record. You will have 3 minutes to address the board. Please self-regulate your time. I would ask that you conclude your comments when your time has ended. I would also remind you to mute your live stream before you begin speaking. Our first caller is, we have one caller and their last four digits are 6987. 6987. I would ask that you go ahead and unmute yourself at this time and state your name for the record.
Good afternoon. This is Ray Trainer.
You may begin.
And thank you. So this is Ray Trainer. I'm the Chief Planning and Innovation Officer here at Sandag, and it was important for me to join you today just to welcome each of you, members of the board of the Air Pollution Control District. And I know that there's a lot of familiar faces that we've been working with over the past years. And I just wanted to recognize that our agencies have sort of a historic opportunity to address air pollution like never before. We believe the region's ready to do really big things, and San Diego's not been equipped previously to really start taking the bold action that we think is necessary to make our region a national leader. I think we all recognize that transportation is the largest contributor to poor air quality in our region, and Sandag's committed through the development of the 2021 regional plan and our 5 big moves to do its part to help ensure that we've got a faster, fairer, and cleaner transportation system. We look forward to working with you at the APCD to do this, and we think that our partnership with AB 617 and the program, along with our recent regional electric vehicle incentive project, are really great models for how we can really conduct ourselves as partner organizations. And so I just wanted to express the excitement that we have as a team here at Sandag to work with you as a new board and to help build on some of these past efforts to really do something that we think is really forward-looking and helps to paint a brighter and cleaner picture for our region's future. So I just wanted to thank you all for your time and appreciate the opportunity to be able to comment. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public comment under non-agenda public communication.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We will now move to the approval of the April 2nd, 2021 minutes. Any board member comments before we move to for approval? All right, seeing none, may I have a motion for approval of the minutes?
Move to approve. Be happy to make the motion.
Okay, we have Chair Sanchez made the move and Member Gomez make the second.
Martinez.
I'm sorry?
It was
Was it
actually reverse. It was Member Martinez who made the motion and I seconded.
There you go. Sorry, I totally messed up. Okay, so I got you. We have a motion and a second. All those, well, I'm gonna have Madam Clerk call the roll vote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Member Birkbeck Garcia,
Yes.
Member Bush, Member Elo Rivera,
Yes.
Member Fletcher, Member Gomez,
Yes.
Member Martinez,
Yes.
Member Mendita,
Yes.
Member Shu,
Yes.
Member Whitburn,
Yes.
Vice Chair Sanchez,
Yes.
Chair Vargas.
Vargas, yes.
That motion passes with all board members who are present voting aye.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Can you please introduce our first item for discussion?
Thank you, Chair Vargas. Your first item for discussion is Agenda Item 1, Amendment to the Services Agreement between the San Diego County Air Pollution Control District and the County of San Diego related to fleet services. The district has prepared a staff presentation for this item. I would ask any members of the public that have requested to speak on this item to please dial into the conference line now using the instructions provided to you.
Good afternoon, board members. I'd like to introduce Deputy Director Israel Garza, who's going to give a presentation today. Israel oversees our support services division, finance, building operations, fleet, etc. All internal support operations. Take it away, Israel.
Thank you, Rob. Good afternoon, Chair Vargas and board members. My name is Israel Garza, and I'm the Deputy Director for the Support Services Division. I will be presenting this item to you. Next slide, please. This action would authorize the Air Pollution Control Officer to amend the services agreement between the APCD and the county to remove the requirement that vehicles be county-owned to be eligible for fleet management services and to revise other provisions of the agreement, including insurance and indemnity. The proposed amendment to the services agreement will not result in any additional cost to the APCD. Next slide, please. The services agreement addresses county services provided to APCD. Many of these services continue beyond March 1st, 2021, and some continue on a limited basis after this date, and some have ceased. County employees currently assigned to APCD will remain county employees subject to the hiring authority of the Air Pollution Control Officer, but otherwise subject to county employee relation policies and procedures. The agreement addresses the payment of costs associated with employees assigned to APCD, including APCD's share of pension obligation bond payments and state unemployment insurance. With the exception for the Enterprise Resource Planning, ERP Oracle Financial System, which is set to expire on July 1st, 2022, there is no established end date to the agreement. Either agency may terminate the agreement upon 1 year written notice to the other agency. This is needed to allow time for a smooth transition in the provision of services to APCD. Next slide, please. As a result, the change in governance and organizational structure, some services provided by the county to APCD ceased effective March 1st, 2021. These include the following. The Land and Use Environment Group will no longer provide support to APCD regarding board letters and docketing, administrative support, or policy direction. The Clerk of the Board of Supervisors will no longer provide support to the new APCD Governing Board or the APCD Hearing Board. The Office of Ethics and Compliance will no longer perform ethics and compliance functions or perform investigations of ethics complaints related to APCD. The Office of Strategy and Intergovernmental Affairs will no longer assist APCD with review and advocacy regarding legislative proposals. The County Communications Office will no longer provide media and communication services to APCD. And the Auditor and Controller services will be very limited after March 1st, only helping with processing financial transactions on Oracle on APCD's behalf. Office of Financial Planning will no longer be supporting APCD on the annual budget, helping with the preparation of the comprehensive annual financial report, the independent audit, single audit, and the schedule of expenditures for federal awards. APCD will also no longer have access to or utilize the county's performance budgeting software. Instead, these functions will be performed by APCD personnel. Changes, positions, or classifications needed to provide these services is reflected in the current fiscal year 2021 budget. Next slide, please. The next two slides shows a list of county departments that provide services to APCD, which continue after March 1st, 2021. Some of the services provided by these departments continue on a much more limited basis after March 1st, 2021. The other county departments listed here will continue to provide services as they do currently. For example, County Counsel will continue to provide legal services, including ongoing legal consultation of the APCD Hearing Board. Next slide, please. The Department of Purchasing and Contracting will continue to act as purchasing agent. Next slide, please. Oh yeah, you're right there, Department of Human Resources. The Department of Purchasing and Contracting will continue to act as a purchasing agent for APCD and provide ongoing assistance with records management, administration of expenditure contracts, and other procurement activities upon request. The Treasurer Tax Collector will continue to provide banking, investment, and armored car services for APCD. And for Auditor Controller and the Office of Financial Planning, many of these services will cease after March 1st, 2021. After July 1st, 2022, APCD will need to have their own ERP system as Oracle support will cease by then. APCD will continue to pay the cost for these county services as it does now, either through direct billing or the county's cost allocation plan based on the services requested. Next slide, please. Today's action would remove the requirement that the County of San Diego remain on the vehicle title to be eligible for fleet management services and revise other provisions related to insurance and indemnity. The revision to the insurance provisions is to add the county as an additional insured on the APCD insurance policies. Next slide, please. This is the end of the presentation, pending any questions you may have for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Masick?
Yes.
Do we have any public comments on this item?
Madam Chair, we have received no requests to speak for item 1.
Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and open it up to any comments from our members.
Chair Vargas had one question.
Yes.
Actually, it looked like Vice Chair Sanchez had her hand up.
Yes, Vice Chair Sanchez. I can't hear.
Thank you very much. My apologies, just had to unmute myself. I understand that everything is being transferred over to the APCD. Are there any net new costs that are being generated as a result of the transfer? I mean, in other words, the costs that were incurred that are in the budget with the county, transferring that to make it separate under APCD, are those costs more, or are they basically net new? I mean, net zero.
Sure. Well, we'll have a better determination after we close the year, because a lot of these services that we're requesting for, but two of the major ones are the ERP system, like I mentioned. With the county and the size of the county, there's a benefit with the size of it, and we're going to have to go out and get our own system. And our initial estimates are in the $5 million range, which obviously we're not paying that with the current county services. But that's a very initial estimate, because we're still we have a statement of work out, and we're still waiting for estimates and a timeline, and we'll be presenting that to the board at a future board meeting. So that's the major one. And then the second one would be our insurance. When we were with the county, and the county is self-insured, there's a lot of cost savings with that. And so we were paying approximately $150,000 a year for insurance, and that's gone up to $350,000 approximately. So that was a big increase in our insurance costs, because we're on our own, if you will.
Right. So when we were separating out and then the budget coming along with the APCD, was that programmed into the budget, or is that something that is going to be a net loss because we are separating to comply with other APCD districts in the rest of the state? I know that they're all separate from the county.
Right. So we anticipated, we had budgeted in the initial 2021 budget. We have 5 new positions that we have in our 2021 budget for all of the services that are no longer going to be provided by the county. For example, our county clerk, we have Marvis as our new county clerk. And so that's no longer provided by the county. So we have that her salary in the budget. We also had a small amount, approximately $1.5 million for ERP systems and other one-time IT costs to help transition over. And so that was also included in the budget.
Would you say that the amount that the difference is about $10 million to separate out from the county altogether? Is that about how much it's going to cost?
We don't have an exact number on that. I'm not sure if it's 10 million. I mean, we will know better once the year closes, and we'll have our final numbers, and we'll be able to provide that in a future board meeting.
Okay, thank you. And that was basically based on a fiscal year versus just this interim time that I was asking. Thank you.
That's correct. And that's part of the challenge because of the March 1st, and we're dealing with 4 months of actual, revenues versus a full fiscal year.
Right.
Right. Thank you, Vice Chair. Anything else?
I think there were other hands up.
No, I am. But is there anything else that you need? I'm going to go.
Oh, no. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Member Elo, and then Member Gomez, and then Member Chu.
Thank you, Chair Vargas, and thank you for asking those questions, Vice Chair Sanchez. Just to kind of build upon that same kind of direction of questions. This is probably very obvious, but I want to make sure it's asked explicitly that the APCD is in the financial position to assume the liability that comes with assuming responsibility for the fleet, et cetera.
Yes, that's correct. Part of the insurance, we got a $10 million general liability coverage, which is standard with other air districts. We reached out to other districts and special districts, and that's kind of the normal standard. So to answer your question, yes.
So yeah, just to be 100% clear, APCD is in the financial position to assume the responsibilities that we're being asked to approve.
That's correct, yes.
Thank you.
Member Gomez?
Yeah, I'm going to continue the dollar questions. So I just actually picking up on what Vice Chair Sanchez started asking. I didn't get clarity. So the current contract, you made mention that there are certain areas that we're not going to be getting any support from the county. So is it safe to assume that our contract is less because of that, or are we paying the same that we were paying before?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Some of the payments that we're paying now to the county will be less. For example, we pay a certain amount to auditor controller for, auditing and accounting services. And since that's going away, we're picking that up internally with our staff.
Okay. So can you tell us how much we were paying in previous years to what we're paying for this new contract?
I don't have those numbers in front of me. I had to pull those up, and I could provide that to you at a future board meeting.
Okay, I think that might be important for us to know. Just I didn't see that in the report, so it would be beneficial to see if we can get that today.
If I could clarify something, the action that's before you today is in amendment of this existing services agreement, and so the amendment itself isn't resulting in any additional costs beyond what was contemplated by the original services agreement. So this is kind of a technical change to the existing agreement because the county was previously prohibited from covering or from providing maintenance for our fleet vehicles if they weren't listed on the title. But APCD has always owned those vehicles, so there's no money changing hands to purchase them from the county. All that's changing is literally the name on the title. And so but the services agreement needed to be reflected to change that. So today's action wouldn't result in any costs, but certainly we could come back at a future meeting and discuss the services agreement kind of in more detail in terms of what the costs are associated with splitting out from the county, as well as the ongoing costs for the services that we get from the county. Does that help?
That would be good. That helps in clarification. So can I just ask, just since you clarified that and that was very beneficial, then the areas that you said that are not going to be covered and we're going to eventually be adding some new positions to APCD to be able to fulfill the work, was that because the county didn't want to provide the services anymore, or that was the decision of our APCD team that it makes more sense to start pivoting and adding these positions internally?
That was negotiated in the services agreement, and that was part of because we're no longer with the county. The county was no longer able to provide those services. Like, for example, right now we roll up into the county's financial system and audits and the CAFRs. Well, since we're separated, we no longer, even if we wanted them to continue by law, they can no longer do that. So all of these changes that we've separated on, it's because they're no longer legally allowed to do that.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. That's all.
Number two. Thank you.
Chair, oh, excuse me.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, through the chair, board member Gomez and board members, also just to put a finer point on it, we did add 5 positions in this current budget to cover the services that are no longer provided by the county. The funding, the AB 423 did not provide a funding source to APCD for separating from the county. And so currently we're using vehicle registration fees to pay for 5 additional positions within the APCD, including clerk of the board and the positions covering the various services that are no longer provided. So it did result in a net increase of 5 positions to APCD. That's around $750,000 a year that we're currently paying for with DMV. There were no fee increases last year. In fact, fees were deferred. So we had to use our fund balance from the Department of Motor Vehicle registration fees that we receive. That was about $750,000 for those 5 positions, if memory serves. Additionally, about the same amount we budgeted for various contracts that we'll need, like we're going to need a new accounting system, as Israel mentioned. And so we put out bids for what it will take to get those systems. Also a cost recovery study. We hired an independent firm that's actually going to be presenting at your next board meeting on the results of their cost recovery study. So there were various studies we needed to sort of study the transition and what we needed. So all told, that was about $1.5 million we set aside. We've not spent all that, frankly, but I just wanted to highlight 5 positions plus some one-time costs that are budgeted this year. And regarding the costs that we currently pay to the county, I fear I can't recall it either. It was in the hundreds of thousands of dollar range for all those services. The economies of scale are going to be lost. And so, adding the positions and these kinds of things, we do think there's going to be a net cost increase just because we don't have the economy of scale that the county does. So, but we're working through those issues. And we'll be presenting balanced budgets to you. We're coming back in June for some budget hearings. And then, if it's acceptable to you, we'd like to then return later in the year, possibly with budget adjustments as we learn more about what's needed here in the transition. So sorry, I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you. Member Chu?
Actually, I wanted to follow up on those points. Rob, for those 5 positions, have they been filled? I'm particularly interested in or concerned with communications and strategy, environmental services, and ethics and compliance. How are those functions being absorbed by your existing staff or the 5 new hires that you're having?
Thank you, Board Member Shu. Regarding ethics and compliance, we're currently doing that with our own HR team internally, and we're conferring with other air districts to learn how they perform those functions as well. But currently our HR unit will be handling any lead investigations involving ethics and compliance with support from County Council. We have hired most of the positions. The communications position we've hired is a community outreach position. The County Board of Supervisors, acting as our governing board last year, directed a new Office of Environmental Justice with 2 positions, a new deputy director and a new community outreach specialist. So we kind of converted our public information position, which was one of the 5 I wanted to add, currently to a community outreach for our Office of Environmental Justice, because the need was immediate, and our management team is covering public communications as best we can through media, et cetera. So that is one position we still need to fill as a public information officer. But we've hired the Deputy Director over Environmental Justice. Mr. Domingo Vigil will be presenting to you today, shortly. Of course, we've got more V's. We've also hired some information technology help. We need a new website, frankly. And so by December, we have to have a new website, and we're well along the way of developing that. So we've hired a new IT position. We've had to hire a new controller. We're not doing our own single annual financial audits through the county anymore. We were now, part of the county roll-up, and so now on our own, we have to do annual audits. So we've hired a position to help us with ensuring that we're performing all auditing requirements every year. So essentially, we filled the 5 positions, but I converted one of them, frankly, for the EJ office, and I'm working now to figure out how best to perform public information sort of on a regional basis without adding positions. I'm looking at things, what we might have available internally. Is there a frozen position somewhere? This kind of work. So more to come, but we're actively working on that as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Member Medina?
One of the benefits of being last is that all the questions have been answered, so I have no further questions. Thank you.
And Vice Chair Sanchez, I think your hand is up from last time, or did you have another comment?
Yeah, another comment, and that is that I'd like to go ahead and move forward staff's recommendation, which is to approve the amendment to the services agreement between the San Diego County Air Pollution Control District and the County of San Diego related to fleet services.
Thank you, Sir Sanchez. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Medina. The only question I had, I did have a question, and so we didn't have it during the discussion, so I'll ask it now. Of the 54 vehicles, I think 29 are not hybrid or electric, right, that are being transferred. So I'm wondering if for trying to reach, our zero emission vehicles and set our goals, would this be the time for us to ask that this would be considered as part of the process, or would you prefer that we do it in the budget item?
Chair Vargas, thank you. That's a good idea to move our fleet to more electric vehicles. This particular document wouldn't be the document to do that. However, if it's acceptable, when we return to the board in June with our budget, we'll present to you a plan for converting, plan and timeline and resources for converting the rest of our fleet to electric to the extent we can, with the caveat that currently some of our vehicles are cargo vans and these kinds of things that house a lot of technical equipment, to the extent that we still would need to transport that equipment from air monitoring site to air monitoring site. And there's some off-road implications to that. So perhaps not every single vehicle, but it would be a worthy exercise for us to present back to you a plan for, well, what can we do? What more can we do? And we'd be happy to bring that to you this June if you'd like.
Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you very much for that clarification. All right, so we have a motion by Vice Chair Sanchez and a second by Member Medina. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Member Burkbeck Garcia.
Yes.
Member,
Yes. Sorry.
Thank you. Member Bush.
Yes.
Member Elo Rivera.
Yes.
Member Fletcher. Member Gomez.
Yes.
Member Martinez.
Yes.
Member Medina.
Yes.
Member Shu.
Yes.
Member Whitburn.
Yes.
Vice Chair Sanchez.
Yes.
Chair Vargas.
Vargas, yes. All
Thank
right.
you, Madam Chair. That motion passes with all members who are present voting aye.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Can you please introduce our next item for discussion?
Thank you. The next item on your agenda is Agenda Item 2, Overview of the San Diego County Air Pollution Control District. Before the presentation begins by staff, I would ask that any members of the public that wish to speak on this item, please dial into the conference line now using the instructions provided to you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Could you please load up the presentation when you get a chance? Thank you. There you go, in view mode. Thank you so much. Again, good afternoon, board members. Rob Ryder, your interim air pollution control officer. Today, we want to brief you on the key elements of the air quality program and the services we provide. Our goal is to help inform your knowledge and start laying the foundation for advancing policies, priorities, and initiatives to improve air quality and public health in communities throughout our region. Presenting with me are the agency's 3 deputy directors who will introduce themselves when they present, and their program chiefs are also standing by to help answer any questions. Next slide, please. Decades of research has shown that clean air is essential to a healthy population, a healthy environment, and in turn, a healthy economy. The district's vision is clean air for all. I underline all. Everyone in communities throughout our region has the right to breathe clean air, our most precious resource. To realize our vision, the district is working daily to achieve its mission of improving air quality to protect public health and the environment. Achieving the vision is possible, but by no means guaranteed. It requires continuous hard work, collaboration, and engagement. Further air quality gains, or even maintaining the gains we've achieved to date, which are significant, will require more resources, greater use of innovation, and stronger, deeper partnerships with the public and our communities, businesses, and other government agencies. Next slide, please. As you know, the legislature amended state law in 2019 to restructure the district board and make other statutory changes to increase transparency, public engagement within the air quality program. This new state law broadened the APCD governing board to 11 members, including county, city, and public representatives. It also imposed additional duties on APCD, including 24-hour, 7-day per week complaint response, creating and maintaining a new website separate from the counties, and posting specified information, including permit applications, permits, and complaints. And as we've discussed, it also separated APCD from county operations. And as a result, We've added 5 positions this fiscal year to provide the administrative and support services no longer provided by the county. Next slide, please. No single agency alone has all the resources necessary to ensure clean air for all. It requires partnerships. The district is part of a coordinated 3-tiered approach to regulating air pollution in accordance with the federal and state Clean Air Acts. The US EPA primarily regulates emissions from interstate traveling sources such as planes, trains, and ships. EPA also regulates large stationary sources like power plants and factories, for which EPA delegates its authority to the local air districts. The California Air Resources Board, or CARB, regulates emissions from in-state mobile sources like on-road and off-road sources. CARB also regulates stationary or portable sources of harmful air toxic emissions, and for which CARB delegates the enforcement to local districts. CARB also regulates certain area-wide sources, such as consumer products and other individually small sources that are prevalent throughout the state. And last but certainly not least, CARB also implements a statewide greenhouse gas reduction program. At the local level, the district regulates emissions from stationary sources throughout the region, such as factories, power plants, gas stations, and some area-wide sources, such as paints and coatings. Next slide, please. California is divided into 35 independent air pollution control districts. Each has similar authority and primary responsibility for regulating air pollution from stationary sources in their respective region. San Diego is one of the five largest air districts, along with South Coast, immediately to our north in the LA area, San Joaquin Valley, Bay Area, and Sacramento air districts. The San Diego APCD works collaboratively, with other air districts through the California Air Pollution Control Officers Association, known as CAPCOA. And I'll mention that because you may hear of that term as you serve on our board, CAPCOA. We work with all the districts through CAPCOA to promote unity and efficiency, and where appropriate, consistency in our methods and practices of air pollution control and management. Next slide, please. The district's key programs are designed to effectively implement the air quality management process and support our mission to protect public health and the environment. It starts with our air quality monitoring program, where we measure outdoor air quality and track progress towards meeting our clean air standards. The resulting air quality data informs the development of plans and measures to attain these clean air standards, including rules to reduce air pollution from factories and other stationary sources. The district then issues operating permits that specify the actions regulated facilities must take to protect air quality, and we conduct unannounced inspections to verify compliance. The district also offers incentive grant funding to further encourage the use of clean technologies and deploy cleaner cars, trucks, and equipment sooner than required by regulation. And the district now has a special focus on environmental justice. In the fall of 2020, the board directed APCD to dedicate 2 positions to ensuring that APCD applies an environmental justice and equity lens in all its activities. This new effort will help further address environmental issues related to air quality throughout the region, especially in disadvantaged communities that are the most impacted by air pollution. In the following slides, my colleagues will share more information on each of these program areas. Domingo, the floor is yours, and next slide, please.
Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Domingo Vigil, Deputy Director with APCD, overseeing our Environmental Justice Office and Monitoring and Technical Services Division. APCD is working to integrate environmental justice in all its programs and activities, and we are excited about embedding this practice into our agency culture. Since last fall, APCD has dedicated my position as well as a program coordinator position to accomplish this mission and goal, and we have been focusing on the following areas in support of environmental justice. We're working on formalizing a framework for the Office of Environmental Justice that will help APCD integrate an equity and environmental justice approach in all our activities. And we're also working on developing a public participation plan that will enhance our outreach and public engagement. We have also been working on the implementation of our Community Air Protection Program, which was established by CARB in response to Assembly Bill 617. The program's mission is to reduce air pollution exposure in impacted communities based on environmental, health, and socioeconomic information. This statewide effort requires community air monitoring, community emission reduction plans, and incentive funding to deploy clean technologies in the most impacted areas. The Portside Environmental Justice Neighborhoods or Portside community, comprised of Barrio Logan, Logan Heights, Sherman Heights, and Western National City, was selected by CARB for a community air quality monitoring program. In December of 2019, the Portside community was selected by CARB to transition from air quality monitoring to the development of a community emissions reduction plan, or CERP. The CERP is being developed with input from a community steering committee, which includes community members, industry, community organizations, and other public entities who are helping identify and implement emission reduction strategies based on the specific needs of the community. The CERP will be completed and presented to your board this summer and will include a full suite of goals, strategies, and actions to improve air quality and reduce exposure to air pollution in the community. Next slide, please. To select communities to participate in the Community Air Protection Program, districts and CARB use CalEnviroScreen, which is a science-based mapping tool developed by the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment and the California Environmental Protection Agency that helps identify California's communities that are most affected by sources of pollution and that are often especially vulnerable to pollution's effects. The criteria used by CalEnviroScreen is comprised of 20 indicators that capture environmental, health, and socioeconomic information to produce a numerical score for each census tract in the state. The indicators include levels of diesel pollution, rates of emergency room visits for asthma symptoms, and levels of poverty. A census tract with a high score is one that experiences higher pollution burden and vulnerability than census tracts with lower scores. Communities with a score equal to or higher than 75% are considered disadvantaged according to CalEPA. The map you see on the slide shows the locations of disadvantaged communities in the San Diego region based on CalEnviroScreen 3.0. Version 4.0 of CalEnviroScreen has been released in draft form, and we will utilize this latest version of the tool once finalized. Next slide, please. As part of the Community Air Protection Program, the district also conducts localized monitoring of air pollutants in the border area. We currently have a monitoring site for black carbon, which can be used as an indicator for diesel particulate matter at the fire station in San Isidro, and a second site is under construction at the Otay Mesa, California Highway Patrol facility, a few yards from the border fence. APCD will be advocating for CARB's selection of the border area to develop a community emissions reduction plan, and we will continue to work with local communities and CARB to expand our program to other disadvantaged neighborhoods in the county. Additional work in the San Diego-Tijuana border includes APCD's collaboration in the U.S.-Mexico Environmental Program Border 2020. As part of this border-wide program led by federal agencies from the U.S. and Mexico, APCD co-chairs the local San Diego-Tijuana Air Quality Task Force, which focuses on strengthening cross-border collaboration between governments, organizations, and communities to identify opportunities to address air quality challenges in the binational air basin. APCD's cross-border collaboration includes working with federal and state agencies and with the state of Baja California to set up a monitoring site at the U.S. Consulate in Tijuana's Otay Mesa community. Lastly, I'd like to share information regarding activities in the Tijuana River Valley. APCD's Compliance Division has received and investigated numerous complaints of odors from the Tijuana River due to sewage flows in the river. APCD has the authority to issue a public nuisance for odors within San Diego County. However, in the case of the Tijuana River, the source of pollution causing the odors is on international soil where we don't have jurisdiction. APCD is currently exploring collaboration opportunities with federal and state agencies to conduct air monitoring at the Tijuana River Valley to collect data that could provide more information to the public, APCD is committed to collaborate with federal, state, and local agencies in developing solutions to the public health crisis. Next slide, please. So now I'd like to zoom out from our community level monitoring activities and look at monitoring region-wide. APCD's ambient air monitoring stations are located between the coast and the mountain foothills up to approximately 2,000 feet in areas where population is dense, traffic patterns are heavy, and industrial sources are concentrated. The monitoring network needs to be large enough to cover a diverse range of topography, meteorology, emissions, and air quality in San Diego, while adequately representing the large population centers. The map on the slide shows our monitoring stations. The Escondido monitoring site is currently under development. The San Isidro site is currently being remodeled to accommodate a full station that will also measure fine particulate matter and toxic air pollutants. Data collected and analyzed is reported to CARB and the EPA, and it's used to determine the district's progress toward meeting air quality goals. Now I would like to turn it over back to Rob.
Thanks, Domingo. Next slide, please. As I noted earlier, the district develops and implements plans to meet clean air standards and protect public health throughout the region and to further reduce emissions and health risks in disadvantaged communities. So to do that, we have a planning unit and a rule development unit. Regarding the planning unit, on a region-wide basis, we attain the clean air standards for all common air pollutants except ozone pollution. So last fall, the board approved an ozone attainment plan to further reduce ozone pollution through a combination of regulatory and incentive-based approaches, including new air pollution control rules that will be presented to your board for consideration later this year. And as Domingo explained, we're working with the Portside community to prepare and implement a plan to improve air quality for Portside residents. That plan will be presented to your board for consideration this summer. APCD's Rule Development Unit develops rules and regulations to implement those plans under the direction of the board. The district currently administers over 100 different rules applying to specific types of industries and equipment that achieve emission reductions by setting emission standards. Now I'll turn the presentation over to my colleague, Mayani. Next slide, please.
Good afternoon, board members. My name is Mayani Luther. I am the acting deputy director of the district, and currently I oversee the compliance and engineering divisions. First, I would like to provide a general overview of the compliance division. The district's compliance division has 4 core programs: inspection program, enforcement program, air quality complaint investigation, and business assistance. Starting with our inspection program, under the inspection program, the district inspects regulated facilities such as power plants, shipyards, coating operations, engines, and other private sector and public agency operations that can create air pollution. We also regulate some demolition and renovation of buildings or structures that might disturb asbestos-containing materials. Additionally, since over 70% of the pollutants that form ozone or smog comes from mobile sources, which includes vehicles, trucks, buses, in 2014, the district signed an agreement with the California Air Resources Board to gain authority to regulate diesel-powered heavy-duty trucks, buses, and equipment. San Diego has the most comprehensive mobile source program in the state as it relates to the number of mobile source regulations we enforce. This program was fully adopted locally in 2017, and since then, the compliance rate has increased from 78% to 92%. This program is really important, and it can assist us in addressing environmental justice issues, since it can bring great benefits to communities that experience a high number of heavy-duty trucks, such as communities by the border and our Portside environmental justice community. We are currently evaluating expanding this program to potentially enforce additional mobile source regulations. Now, moving on to our enforcement program, the district's enforcement program is designed to maximize compliance through deterrence. The district takes enforcement actions when it documents violations of air pollution regulations. We issue 3 types of enforcement documents: notice of violations, which are issued to stationary sources and result in monetary penalties; citations, which are issued for mobile source violations and also result in monetary penalties in accordance with the agreement we established with the California Air Resources Board. And we also issue notice to comply for very minor violations in accordance with District Rule 6. Notice to comply do not result in monetary penalties. In fiscal year 1920, the district issued about 900 notices of violation, 300 citations, and 300 notices to comply. On average, we collect about $1 million annually through settlements of notice of violations and citations. When settling violations, the district can also consider environmental community-based projects as part of violation settlements to benefit communities and improve public health. Now, moving on to our complaint program, the district also responds to air quality complaints. Typical complaints involve reports regarding smoke, dust, odors, and improper asbestos removal. This program provides a great avenue to directly serve our communities. Our field inspectors take air quality complaints very seriously, and they have documented significant violations through our complaint response program, such as violations involving exposure to asbestos-containing materials. Additionally, the requirements under Assembly Bill 423 were very helpful to dedicate additional resources to our complaint program. After the bill was signed, we're able to evaluate our complaint program under a business process re-engineering framework, and we are now implementing solutions to enable customers and stakeholders to access complaint information in real time and integrate systematic controls and reporting tools to enhance our services. About 1,000 air quality complaints are evaluated by the district annually. Now, moving on to our business assistance program, while the district has a solid enforcement program as required by state law, it also provides assistance to the regulated community to prevent violations. The Compliance Division offers training, outreach, and compliance assistance. Next slide, please. I would like to provide more details regarding our Supplemental Environmental Project Program, because this program can help us build healthier communities by improving public health, reducing air pollution, increasing environmental compliance, and raising public awareness to communities most burdened by environmental harm. As previously mentioned, the district can consider environmental community-based projects as part of our violation settlements. The district is working on expanding our Supplemental Environmental Project Program because enforcement through monetary penalties can deter environmental violations, but supplemental environmental projects can address the environmental harm impacting communities. As an example, the district has recently finalized a violation settlement that requires the installation and operations of air monitoring stations to monitor particulate matter and diesel particulate matter in Imperial Beach and San Isidro. Particulate matter are very small particles that can affect our lungs and heart. Various scientific studies have linked particulate pollution exposure to heart attacks, respiratory issues, and asthma. Diesel particulate matter has a significant impact on California's population. It is estimated that about 70% of total known cancer risk related to air toxic emissions in California is related to diesel particulate matter exposure. These monitoring stations will be located in Imperial Beach and San Isidro and will supplement the air emission data Domingo discussed earlier for these communities. Next slide, please. Now I'd like to provide a general overview on the district's engineering program. The district engineering program, the district engineer division has 3 core programs: permitting, emission inventory, and our air toxic hotspots program. Under the permitting program, we evaluate permit applications and we issue permits with conditions to ensure ongoing compliance with air pollution regulations. About 400 applications are processed annually, and we have 7,000 permitted sources in San Diego County. Under the emission inventory program, the district quantifies emissions and determines significant sources of air pollution. The emission inventory reports are available to the public for review. Now, moving on to our air toxic hotspots program. This program requires stationary sources of air toxics to report their emissions to be evaluated for public health risks. Then, based on the health risk, the program requires public notification and risk reductions for sources with elevated health risks. Stationary sources are facilities permitted by the district, including manufacturing operations, power plant, and other private sector and public agency operations that can create air pollution. Air toxics are chemicals in the form of gases, liquids, or particles that are emitted into the atmosphere and when exposed to might cause adverse health effects. An example of an air toxic is diesel particulate matter, or diesel PM, which is emitted from diesel engines. And the adverse health effects can range from eye or throat irritation, headaches, to more permanent and serious conditions such as cancer, birth defects, damage to lungs, heart, and other organs. The district will be providing a more comprehensive presentation regarding the air toxic hotspots program to the board and members of the public on May 7th. We will also present a report with the status of the implementation of this program. The district has also scheduled a virtual public meeting for April 22nd at 5 p.m. to discuss the status of the hotspots program. Next slide, please.
I'll take this one. Thank you so much, Mayani. Studies by the EPA have shown that every dollar invested to reduce air pollution returns $3 or more in healthcare and other savings due to fewer illnesses, workday losses, and school days missed. Accordingly, the APCD administers several incentive grant programs to encourage the use of clean technologies by businesses, public agencies, and residents sooner than required by regulation. Participants receive new, cleaner equipment at a reduced cost, resulting in improved air quality and public health. Collectively, these programs are designed to provide equity by ensuring the incentives are distributed across a range of demographics, including low-income and disadvantaged communities. Over the past 2 decades, the APCD has allocated $131 million. I'll repeat, $131 million in incentive funding for the replacement of old, highly polluting, heavy-duty engines in trucks, marine vessels, locomotives, and agricultural equipment. In return, these investments resulted in an estimated $393 million in healthcare and other savings for our region. I will now turn it over to my colleague Israel to bring us on home.
Next slide, please. Thank you, Rob. Good afternoon, members of the board. I will be sharing 2 slides with you. The first is a slide providing an overview of the 3 AB 423 related audits. First, the California State Auditor conducted an audit of our financial and outreach activities. This audit started in September 2019 and was completed almost a year later, with the final report being released in July of 2020. The district concurred with the findings and has provided the state auditor 60-day and 6-month updates on our efforts to implement the recommendations that are within our statutory authority. All the recommendations that are within our statutory authority are either completed or in progress to be completed by the auditor's recommended due date. The auditor had 6 key recommendations as follows. Ensure we leverage all funding opportunities. Ensure that the permit fees the district charges is sufficient to pay for its permit program. Monitor the impact of COVID-19 and, when economic conditions allow, propose fee increases. Implement a public participation plan to ensure that the district is responsive to stakeholders. Establish policies and procedures to validate entered complaint information, review and respond to these complaints, and ensure key administrative services are in place. The district will be adding an agenda item at the May 7th board meeting to present in more detail all the auditor recommendations and our recent 6-month responses. Next is the APCD programs audit. This audit is a partnership with the California Air Resources Board and the State Department of Finance. This audit started in July of last year with the Department of Finance audit completed and report released in February of this year. No findings or recommendations were presented in this report. The California Air Resources Board audit is ongoing and is mandated by AB 423 to be completed by June 1st of this year. The last audit that I will mention is a financial statements audit. The district will be responsible for preparing financial statements starting with the current fiscal year ending June 30, 2021. The CPA firm, MGO, has been contracted with to audit these financial statements on an annual basis. Starting next fiscal year, 21-22, the district will be posting budget versus actual financial information on our new APCD website and will be providing a quarterly update to the board starting in November of this year. Next slide, please. The district's annual budget for fiscal year 2021 is $80.1 million. The budget is funded by a combination of state and federal pass-through grants, which make up the largest portion at 39%, and Rob discussed these grants earlier in the presentation. Transfers from other APCD funds makes up the next largest portion at 20%. These account for the transfer or movement of money from one district fund to another district fund, such as a transfer of funds from the Community Air Protection Program Fund, AB 617, to the district operating fund in order to administer this program. Next is the district revenues that come from vehicle registration fees at 14%. These funds are collected by the DMV and provided to the district from a $4 surcharge on each vehicle registered in the county. Next is 12% of operations that are funded by permits and other fees, such as application fees, asbestos, and exmission fees paid by the regulated businesses. The use of fund balance for one-time needs and projects makes up 8% of the budget, and this includes pass-through grant funds received in prior years due to timing of projects, one-time expenditures to support AB 423 implementation, and replacement of the roof and HVAC system at the district's main building. Next is intergovernmental funds, federal and state grants at 6% for monitoring program expenses. And last but not least is 1%, which are fines and penalties assessed by the Compliance Division as described by Miney in a previous slide. I will now turn it over to Rob to complete the presentation. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Israel, and thank you, board members. That was a long presentation, but thank you for providing the opportunity to present an overview of our air quality program. That really ends our presentation, and we're available to answer your questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ryder, and thank you to the whole staff for the overview and the presentation. Madam Clerk, are there any public comments before I go to the members?
No, Madam Chair, there are no members of the public wishing to speak on this item.
All right, so as before I turn over to the members for any questions or discussion, I do want to say that as we're working through the restriction of the district, and I will be reaching out to each of you separately so we can talk about any particular priorities that you may have. I know that board member Shu already has expressed some items that he would like to make sure that we follow up on. And we have a lot of work to do. So for the next meeting, I do want to make sure that I know that there's been a couple of different mentions around some of the issues, but on May 7th, we're going to have a big agenda because we're also going to be addressing the annual hotspots report and the state audit and fee recovery. And then, you know, as part of the restructuring, as a way to invite the stakeholders and the community participate, engage, we'll work with staff to place an item on the May 21st meeting for board priorities as well. So I'll be reaching out to board members in addition to that and make sure that we have engagement from the community and stakeholders for the May 21st meeting. With that, are there any comments or questions from the board members? Member Gomez?
I think member Chu was first.
Member Chu. And just so that you all know, I am in a, you know, because of the Zoom, the lights are really weird because of where I am. And so I can't see the little hand. So feel free to raise your hand if I don't see you. Okay. I apologize for that. Thank you.
Thank you. That's
fine. And Member Gomez and then Member Benita.
Thank you, Chair Vargas. I just have a quick question for staff. In the past, in public comments to the county and others, I've often said that, and this is kind of morbid, but I find the lungs of children to be pretty good indicators of air quality. And so I'm wondering if APCD ever have looked at data from hospitals of of children who suffer from asthma, or in other cases, cancer cases. That's how Cal Environmental Screening gets some of their data to designate these areas. And it seems like that's data that's available now, and we have a past record of that. And that may help us also identify the real problem areas. And I think it's more result oriented, it's more outcome oriented into the actions we may take. And it also gives us a better baseline as opposed to simply putting up more stationary monitoring sites.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'll punt it to Mr. Domingo Vigil.
Thank you, Rob. Mr. Shu, yes, excuse me, board member Shu. We have taken a look at this data as part of, as you mentioned, part of Cal Environmental Screen takes a look at a number of variables to determine the different rankings for the different zip codes in the region. And that's integrated into that system already. So that's part of what we're taking into consideration as we select the communities that we're getting involved through our community air protection program. In addition, we're also looking for opportunities to expand our collaboration and take a look at other health indicators through the county's Health and Human Services Agency. So that's also something that will help us expand our analysis of disadvantaged communities. So we're certainly open to expanding our lens and welcome your input on that as well.
Thank you. Member Gomez?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the very in-depth presentation and for sending the materials over. Really appreciate it, reading through it. I had several questions, so bear with me, and I'll go ahead and follow it up over an email to staff. But in relation to the plan, the slide that makes reference to planning and rule development, is it possible to get a copy of the policies as well as the rules that are already in existence? I would appreciate that.
Of course, Board Member Gomez. Yes, and those are available on our website, but we'll be happy to provide whomever, hard copies or however, in whatever format anyone needs it in. But currently on our website, all of our rules and regulations and plans are posted on there.
Yes, I was spending some time yesterday on the website, which, by the way, makes me happy to hear that we're going to be updating the website. It needs a little bit of love, so I appreciate that. And the other question that I have in relation to the hotspots, and I'll limit my questions on that one, being that we're going to spend next meeting discussing it, but just overall, it was interesting when I was reading the slides on the grants and incentives that we have, and maybe this is part of the development of targeting EJ, the program on EJ, but there's very little programs that are targeted. A lot of the programs that we have are directed to help the industry, which is good, and I get it, but there's very little support for the residents that are living in these hotspots. So I'm hoping that as we're engaging the development of what we're going to be doing for hotspots, that we take it beyond monitoring, just like what Member Shu was stating. We need to do more, and I think there's an opportunity to expand programs to actually facilitate the people living in those communities. So I'd love to see that in the future, or part of the EJ program that will be coming to us. And then the other piece, you mentioned the April 22nd meeting. Are we doing intentional invitations to specifically the communities that are labeled hotspots?
Go ahead, Marnie. Thank you.
Board Member Gomez, thank you for your question. Yes, we've been doing outreach, to promote this meeting, and on various forums. We have been working with our, the district's outreach, a communications person, and we have informed several different stakeholders and community groups of this meeting. And the idea there is we're going to be discussing the draft report that summarizes the implementation of the Hotspots program.
Can you just give me a glimpse of what that outreach looks like?
So we send out a mail mail out to thousands of addresses in different community groups, including EHC, Casa Familiar, and others. I don't have the list, right in front of me, but I would be happy to send you the list of organizations and addresses that received this meeting invite. We also sent out a notification via our subscription services, I know that went to thousands of people. And if there's any other organizations that you think we should reach out to, we would be happy to do that as well.
Yeah, I would appreciate that report, and also maybe the invitation that is getting sent out. And I also look forward to hearing more of how we can expand our outreach as we move forward. And I know COVID has, limit some of the engagement, but I think we can do better. So, but I appreciate it. Thank you. And then I have quite a bit of questions. So, and I apologize. I'm just trying to prioritize. The other piece that I had was, and I didn't see it. I think I got taken out from the presentation. But it was on there was a slide, at least the presentation that we received. There's a slide on the toxic air contaminant trends, and that's the cancer risk per 1 million. I know that Chair Vargas, you mentioned that you're going to be asking us for priorities, but definitely I do know that other APCD agencies have a lower threshold. So I'm hoping that we can explore that. And even agencies that are similar to us have lower. So definitely we'll love to see that happen in our watch as well. And then the rest, I'll just, for purpose of respecting people's time, I'll just go ahead and follow up directly with staff. I know that we're going to be setting up a one-on-one, so I'll go ahead and do that. But I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Medina? I'm sorry, it was Member Burbank Garcia next. And then Vice Chair Sanchez and Medina, I think.
I think I was the last one to put my hand up. Yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to say that I did have a chance to meet with APCL Ryder and his deputy program directors and to go over some of the multiple questions that I had about the handbook. And I do appreciate the time that you dedicated to help me prepare for this meeting. I would like to just follow up on a couple of items with Board Member Gomez's questions about the outreach. And I think that we need to go beyond outreach. We need to get into engagement. That's really the key. And so to that extent, one of the things that I think is important is to demystify the rules. And Board Member Gomez asked for the rules. They're very difficult to read and understand. And so one question that I have for you is, and I hope that you can integrate this into your planning, is to have plain language descriptions of all these rules. And that way, I think more of the community will be able to understand what we're talking about. The same thing with variances that come before the hearing board. In order for us to participate, I think it's very important that we understand what the implications are. And one of the items in the presentation was that apparently the rules go through an update cycle. And I would be curious to know which rules are coming up this year, and what is the plan for making those updates also more understandable to the public, and then reaching out to the community. So maybe you can address that.
Board Member Medina, if I may just start by addressing your comment on outreach and engagement. One of the efforts that we're moving forward with this year is the development of our public participation plan. And part of what that will include is precisely that, guidelines for also how we communicate the information that we're producing as an agency, in a way that the members of the public are able to understand and are able to more easily access the information and get engaged. Public participation will be a very strong focus for our agency moving forward. And we are currently trying to work with within our department in all of our different divisions to see what are some of the outreach needs that they have and see how we can adjust some of our outreach methods in a way that we can not just make the communication available to the members of the public, but also get significant and meaningful engagement out of that. So I just wanted to share that, and more to come. As we develop our public participation plan, we will definitely like to present it to your board to have the opportunity of providing feedback before we finalize that.
If I may add on, Board Member Medina, regarding the rules that will be presented to the board later this year, in August, we're anticipating coming to you with some set of rules that require federal permits of large stationary sources. But for our ozone plan, we have to strengthen the health protectiveness of those rules in accordance with the Federal Clean Air Act. And so we're in the process now of going through a public review process of amending those rules to further reduce ozone forming emissions. So that will help. I will say, though, that's on stationary sources because we don't regulate mobile. And with ozone forming emissions, mobile sources are the largest source. But nevertheless, everyone has to contribute to clean air, and stationary sources will be proposing tighter regulations on federal permit standards in August. We're also committed to developing and presenting to the board later this year a rule called landfill flares rule that will mitigate excess emissions captured at the landfills that are currently released into the air. So we found through our evaluation process that other districts do have a landfill flares rule. Of course, we want to have one as well. So we're committed to bringing one to your board for consideration. We're also working on updating our asbestos rule. We're working on a composting rule, actually, because as you all know, a lot of the waste in landfills can be composted. And to save our planet, there's a lot of initiatives to increase composting to reduce greenhouse gas forming emissions. The one caveat with that, however, is when you pull those materials out of the landfill and aerate them and compost them, they reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but they actually produce smog forming emissions instead. So it's a little bit of a trade-off. So while we want to reduce landfill emissions, we don't want to increase smog forming emissions. So we're developing a rule to require emission controls for commercial scale composting facilities. And a large rulemaking effort is going to be our indirect source proposal that Board Member Hsu touched on in our first meeting. AB 423 does require the board to consider adopting an indirect source rule. And so we're planning, if it's acceptable to your board, to perhaps do that in 2 phases. A couple of districts have developed those, and it's been very challenging for them. And so we're going to learn from those other districts. But what I'd like to do is perhaps later this year bring back to the board concepts for how to reduce emissions from the motor vehicles and trucks that are attracted to warehouses and other large establishments. Again, it's required by AB 423 anyway, so we'll definitely be bringing that to you. But I'm thinking perhaps in 2 phases. First, concepts, get your buy-in on concepts, and then we'll go back and work on developing a rule with the public input that we would bring back next year. So that's just some of them. There likely are more rulemakings, and we're also developing the Portside Community Emission Reduction Plan. Proposed rulemakings may come out of that plan. That plan's not yet adopted, but it's possible. And so, sorry for the long answer, but there are several rules in the pipeline. We do have a fairly well-established regulatory rule book, and so we're not at the moment considering dozens of rulemakings, et cetera, but nevertheless some key ones on turbines, landfills, composting, federal permit thresholds, and the like.
Right. Thank you, APCO. Right. One thing you didn't mention, but Mayani mentioned it, which was the welding issue. If you can just make sure that that's added to the list, because I think that's a disproportionate impact in BJ communities.
I was remiss in mentioning that we are pursuing permitting of welding operations through an existing provision we have in our rules. So we will be happy to update you of any significant developments, but we are regulating welding and we're exploring now the feasibility of further controlling welding that may be feasible for a permit requirement. So more to come on that. And I was also remiss in not mentioning our plan to update the hotspots rule itself. Several of you have noted the risk threshold being currently at 100 in a million is higher than you would like to see. And we are working on rule amendments to lower that threshold. First, we're gathering all the data on the health risks from the facilities themselves currently so that we better understand if the board were to consider lowering the health risk threshold, what kind of baseline are we working from, and how hard will it be for these facilities to comply with a new lower standard? So we're working through those issues, and we'll be returning to the board as soon as we gather the data and then can implement and use that to inform the rulemaking. We're hoping to return this year with that rulemaking as well.
Thank you. Vice Chair Sanchez, and then Member Burbeck, and then Member Gomez.
Thank you. A few set of questions. First of all, with respect to the budget, going forward, would that be kind of stable revenues over time? What have the budgets been like before in terms of revenues? Also, will we be getting a summary of like historic trends of like complaints that have been made? You know, along with the hot spots, also just complaints from the community. And then also, I was wondering in terms of getting out to the community and kind of being more forward thinking and maybe closer to the ground, would we be able to do something like a speakers bureau and maybe go out to maybe places where like parents could be along with students? And I think that would be really cool, partnering with maybe some of the members with staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Member Burbeck Garcia.
Thank you. Thanks for that presentation. I was wondering if I could meet with the staff sometime before the next meeting to go over what health indicators are being used for the hotspots, what diagnosis is, where you're pulling that data from. Is it just hospitalizations? Is it clinic visits? Is it diagnosis codes? I also have some concerns that, especially like in the San Isidro, Otay Mesa areas, Chula Vista areas, we're not getting all the numbers because a large population of San Diegans drive across the border to get their medical care. And so we may be missing some of these numbers that would actually show that some of these areas are more disadvantaged. So I just want to pick some brains with some of the staff members. So if we could just set up a time for a meeting, I'd appreciate that. And then the other thing, kind of echoing what everybody else has said about communication out there, I did want to piggyback on Vice Chair Sanchez's point, but I think it's important to get the children engaged. I'm a pediatrician, so I'm a big advocate for children. I have a high school age and middle school age children. They make an impact. As a parent, I'm going to tell you, you know, they make an impact with what we do, even getting into the community colleges as things are starting to open up. I think engaging us and using us as a resource, I know I'd be happy to go out and talk and do what I can to help. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Actually, I was thinking that we should also include the school districts in the discussion for the hotspots. Because they do have different data that I think we might be able to utilize, especially for our students who are binational and are living the cross-border life. But so thank you for that. Member Gomez.
Yeah, just had a couple more questions, and thank you, Chair Vargas, for giving me more time. The question that I left out was in relation. I'm glad that we're going to be hearing about the permit fee next month. The other question that I had related to fees was the vehicle registration fee. When was the last time that we increased that fee?
Board Member Gomez, it's from memory, it's been about 10 years or so, and I don't believe there's authority to increase it. If that were a consideration, we're at $4 per vehicle, and I believe that's the maximum we are allowed to charge. Some other air districts do collect more, but state law, I think, caps us at $4.
Can we look into that? Because I thought I thought in the audit it said that it can go up to $6.
Board Member Gomez, that's correct. Legally under the Health and Safety Code, it can go up higher. However, we're also limited by Prop 26 in the types of fees that we can charge without it being considered a tax. But we can certainly look into what the legal limitations on us would be for something like that.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And then I'm also, I was going to ask about the indirect source rules, and I'm glad that we're going to be looking at that. There was just a recent article yesterday in The Guardian in relation to Amazon's warehouses and citing them in low-income communities, creating extra air pollution in those communities that are already impacted. And I know they're starting to look at our region as well. I know North County is looking at it. There's a border one. So happy to see that we're going to be looking into that. And then just lastly, related to the Tijuana River, I'm glad that we made mention. I would want us to be stronger in that area. I know that there's questions about the international waters, but definitely I would love us to be more engaged in that. I was happy during non-public comment that somebody from Sandag made some comments. I don't know what the role, if ever, or maybe it's a new time, so a new era. So it might be good to start looking at engaging with the development of the RTP. And I know that our jurisdiction is not mobile, but, you know, we received that email yesterday saying that we're going from severe to, we're moving to severe on our ozone layer, ozone. And most of it comes because of mobile sources. And so there's an implication. And I think there's an opportunity to also be involved in other bodies that might have jurisdictions that impact those types of impacts. Also, the city's general plan updates related to land use, I think that's a big deal, and where we cite people, where they're going to live. So I just think that it's an opportunity for us to, as an agency, to be involved in those areas. So I really appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Vargas.
Thank you for those comments. And I will say that, you know, the county did declare the Tijuana River Valley a public health care crisis. And so I think there's a direct connection, and I'll be having my first meeting on that item on April 27th. And so we'll make sure that we make that connection, and some of the folks on here will be participating as well. So thank you for that. Any other comments from any board members? All right, seeing none, Madam Clerk, can you introduce our next item, which is a closed session item?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The final item on your agenda is closed session. I would ask any members of the public that wish to speak on this item to please dial into the conference line now using the instructions provided to you. With regard to closed session, any reportable matters will be reported out at the conclusion of this public meeting.
All right, thank you with that. We will now recess into closed session. You should have received a separate link from Paula on that item. And so I will see you in closed session.
Chair Vargas, I just would want to clarify with the clerk whether we have any public members that have called in to
Thank you,
public
Paula.
comment.
I was going to state that there are no members of the public wishing to address the board on this matter.
Thank you. And then, yes, if you would please use the separate link for the closed session meeting that was sent to you. I'll see you over there.
432-077.
So it looks like we have our quorum back. This is the report out from closed session. There are no reportable items from closed session.
Thank you. So we are at the end. So I will be adjourning this meeting to, what is the next meeting? I'm sorry.
The next regularly scheduled meeting of the Air Pollution Control District Governing Board will take place on Friday, April 16th, 2021 at 1:30 p.m.
Today is Friday, April 16th.
I'm sorry, May 7th, 2021.
Okay.
May 7th, 2021 at 1:30 p.m.
Thank you. So let it be done now. Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend. Bye.
You too. Thank you.